My 17-year-old daughter, Eden, was banned from the wedding for my sister Brooke because she was too young. I did not argue. I only said we would not be attending. When Christmas arrived, I made one quiet change, and my whole family erupted. My name is Julia Sanders, and I am the oldest of 3 sisters. I was the helper, the babysitter, the one who handled what others avoided. Brooke was the middle sister, loud and charming, always pulling attention. Taryn was the youngest, the baby, and she escaped consequences with a smile. I cleaned up after everyone, and I learned to do it quietly. Years later, I adopted Eden when she was 3 years old. She had big, serious eyes and a careful way of watching people. The first time she called me Mom, I cried after preschool pickup. I promised her she would never feel unwanted in my family, not ever again. Last spring, Brooke got engaged, and Eden made her a card full of glitter and tiny paper bells. Brooke called it sweet, then forgot it in her car. Eden did not notice. She was too excited about the wedding. She looked at dresses online and asked if she should wear her hair up or down. She was nervous, but hopeful, and she wanted to be included. Then the invitation arrived in the mail. It was thick paper with gold edging. I opened it at the kitchen counter, while Eden did homework at the table. I scanned the details, then my stomach dropped. Only my name and my husband Eric were listed. Eden was not invited. At the bottom, in neat polite print, it said, "Guests must be 18 and over." Eden looked up and asked why her name was missing. I told her it was an adult-only wedding, and I tried to keep my voice steady. She went quiet, then asked, "Is it because I am adopted?" She said it calmly, like she had been saving it for later. Something in me cracked anyway. I told her no, and I held her close. But I also knew what she meant. This was not the first time my family had treated her like an afterthought. This time, it was just official. I did not fight. I did not yell. I simply clicked, not attending. My phone rang the next afternoon, and I answered with a tight chest. It was Susan, my mother, and her tone was careful. "Julia," she said, "I heard you were not going to the wedding. Is this really about the age rule?" I told her the rule did not matter. Eden was the one left out. I said I will not sit in a church while my daughter is pushed aside. Susan sighed and tried to soften it. She said Eden is almost 18. It is not like she is a little kid. She said she is family, and Brooke probably did not mean it that way. Then she said, "Do not punish your sister over this. It is one night, and it will be easier if you just go along." I did not debate. I only repeated the truth. Eden is not invited, so Eric and I are not attending. Susan called me stubborn, and I ended the call. I thought that would be the end of it, but the messages started within an hour. The family group chat lit up, and every line felt like a shove. Taryn wrote that I was making a scene over one simple rule. Brooke wrote that I always turn things into drama, and that it was not personal. Someone added that other guests could not bring teenagers either, so Eden was not special. Susan sent a long note about unity and forgiveness, and how hard it is for her. I did not answer any of it, because I knew the trap. Eden saw the notifications, and her face went still. That night, she deleted the dress pictures from her phone, and she stopped asking about hair. She did not cry, and that hurt in a different way. She looked unsurprised, like she had learned this lesson before. I sat beside her and told her she belonged with me. She nodded and said she knew. As the weeks passed, no one apologized, and no one named what happened. The calendar moved toward Christmas, and I realized silence had become their answer. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, the house felt strangely calm. Eden did her homework, and Eric made coffee like usual. I told myself that calm was a choice, not a defeat. On the morning of the ceremony, Susan sent a text that said she wished I would reconsider. Taryn sent a longer one, full of smiley faces and blame. Brooke sent nothing at all, and that silence spoke louder than any argument. Eden stayed in her room, and I heard her music through the door. I knocked, and asked if she wanted to do something together. She came out with her hair pulled back, and her eyes looked tired. We drove to a little diner, and we ordered pancakes, because it felt like a small rebellion. The waitress asked if we were celebrating, and Eden smiled politely. I watched my daughter keep herself steady. It was the way I used to, and I hated that. When we got home, I saw more messages, more hints that I was ruining a perfect day. One aunt wrote that I should stop being dramatic because Brooke deserved happiness. Another wrote that family always comes first, and I should remember where I came from. I read them, and I put my phone face down. That night, I made popcorn, and we watched a movie on the couch. Eden laughed at the funny parts, but she kept glancing at my phone. I told her she did not have to prove anything to anyone. She did not have to earn a seat. She asked me if I was angry, and I told her I was clear. Anger burns fast, clarity lasts longer. A few days later, wedding photos hit social media, and I saw my sisters smiling in matching dresses. I noticed a caption from Taryn, about sisters forever, and nothing about my family. I closed the app, and I felt something settle in me. If they could erase Eden with one invitation, they could erase her again. Christmas was coming, and I knew what they expected from me. They expected my house, my cooking, my effort, and my silence. I decided I would not give them all of that. Not this year. I did not announce anything. I simply did nothing. In early December, I usually set a date and host everyone. That year I did not send a message, and I did not offer my house. The silence did the talking for me. Susan called and asked what time we should all come over. I told her I was not hosting this year, and my voice stayed even. She asked why I was being cold, and I said I was done pretending. I said Eden was hurt, and no one cared enough to name it. Within minutes, the group chat woke up again. Taryn wrote that I was punishing everyone for one wedding rule. Brooke said I was holding a grudge and ruining the holidays. Someone wrote that Eden should understand being left out because she's almost grown. I did not answer, and that seemed to make them louder. 2 days later, the doorbell rang in the late afternoon. I opened the door and saw Susan and James on my porch. They held a box that smelled like cinnamon. Susan smiled too widely and said they brought cookies, as if sugar could fix it. James stood behind her, quiet and stiff, like he wanted to disappear. Eden was in the hallway, and I felt her pause. Susan stepped inside and said we should talk like adults and move forward. Then she said the sentence that changed the room. She said, "Eden is not really our granddaughter, Julia. You know that." She said I was acting like this was the same as blood, and it was not. My throat went dry, and I saw Eden freeze. I asked Susan to repeat herself, and she tried to soften it. She said she loves Eden, but I was taking things too far. She said one day Eden would leave, and I would regret burning bridges. James still did not speak, and that silence felt like agreement. I stepped between them and the hallway, and I told them to leave. Susan looked shocked, like boundaries were a crime. I closed the door, I locked it, and I held Eden until her hands warmed again. The moment Susan and James stepped off my porch, I held my breath and listened. I did not hear kindness in their visit. I heard leverage and a threat. Susan kept repeating that I would regret it when Eden left me someday. She said their door would stay open and I would come back once I realized they were right. She said it like a promise and like a punishment at the same time. I did not answer her because her words were not meant for a conversation. They were meant to make me doubt my own family and crawl back into line. So I closed the door and I locked it. I leaned against the wood until the air felt normal again. Eric asked if I wanted him to say something, and I told him no. Eden stood in the hallway, too quiet, and I saw her trying to disappear. That night, I barely slept because I kept hearing the phrase, "not blood," like a bell. The next morning, I told Eden what Susan said, even though it hurt me to repeat it. I have never lied to my daughter, not about anything that shapes her life. Eden sat on the couch with her knees pulled in, and she stared at the carpet. Her hands clenched hard in her lap, and her shoulders turned rigid, like armor. She asked if Susan really believed she would leave me, like I was temporary. I told her Susan did not believe that. Susan hoped it. If Eden left, then I would need my birth family again, and they could own me. Eden nodded slowly, and her voice stayed steady. She said they did not get to hope things about her. She said they did not get to rewrite who she is. I told her she was my daughter, because I chose her, and she chose me too. Eric sat beside us, and said the same, and Eden finally let out a long breath. For a moment, the house felt safe again, and I thought the boundary might hold. I should have known that people like Susan and Taryn do not stop when you stop responding. I thought the visit would be the worst of it, but the next wave arrived quietly. About a week later, my cousin Elise forwarded an email, and she sounded embarrassed. She wrote that she did not agree with it, but the whole family was reading it. The message came from Taryn Sinclair, and it was long, rambling, and wrapped in fake concern. She wrote like she was worried about me, and every line still painted me as unstable. She told them I had abandoned the family for a girl who manipulated her way into my home. She implied Eden had been difficult, distant, and ungrateful, and that I refused to see it. She suggested my bond with Eden was unhealthy, like love had turned into obsession. She claimed I was protecting Eden from imaginary slights, and punishing everyone for rules they did not make. It was vile, and worse, it worked fast. People started reaching out with soft voices, and sharp assumptions underneath. Aunt Marlene texted to ask if I was okay, as if I needed help. Uncle Peter called Eric, and asked if I was having some kind of breakdown. Even strangers in the family tree joined in. A second cousin left a comment on one of Eden's art posts. She said Eden was lucky and should not forget who gave her a home. Eden saw it on her phone, and I saw her expression shut down, like a door closing. That was the last straw for me. After that comment, more followed, little jabs dressed as advice. Someone wrote that Eden should be grateful, and stop causing division. Eden did not answer them. She just stopped posting for a while. I watched her shrink her world, to avoid giving them another target. That is when I understood the damage was larger than the wedding. They were willing to smear a child, to protect their comfort, and to win a story. Taryn wanted a narrative where Eden was the problem, because that kept Brooke spotless, and kept Susan innocent. I did not reply to Taryn, because arguments feed people like her. I decided to answer with something she could not twist, a full record. I did not write a response. I wrote a dossier, and I treated it like evidence. I gathered screenshots, group chat messages, and old texts, and I labeled them by date. I added photos from family events, and I noted who was missing and why. I included every ignored invitation, and every exclusion dressed up as tradition. I included every time Eden was called your girl, instead of our granddaughter. I wrote a letter that stayed calm, and stayed factual, because emotion would have given them an excuse. I sent it once to the extended family. I used a simple subject line, for those who wanted the full story. I did not demand anyone take sides, and I did not ask for apologies. I only gave them the truth, and let it stand in the light. Some people replied quietly, and a few unfriended Taryn without drama. Some did not respond, and some told me I should talk it out, for peace. A few did not believe me, because believing me would mean admitting what they enabled. None of that changed why I did it. I did it for Eden, so she would never doubt her own memory. She would never wonder if she imagined the pattern. I wanted her to stop asking herself if blood would have made them kinder. When I hit send, my hands were steady, because the decision was already made. I was not trying to win. I was trying to protect. Some relatives thanked me for clarifying, and some stayed silent, and that silence was its own answer. The loudest ones kept pushing, insisting I should forgive and host, and pretend nothing happened. I learned who cared about peace, and who cared about people. I also learned that certain doors are only useful as exits. I am sure they still talk about us, and I am sure Eden's name is said with judgment. They can keep the story. They lost the right to know her. After that, I blocked everyone who tried to argue. I blocked everyone who treated unity as more important than a child feeling safe. The silence that followed felt different, not empty, but clean, like the house could breathe. The week after I sent that record, the noise changed shape and it thinned out. Some relatives went quiet because they could not argue with dates. Some stayed loud because loudness is their only tool. Brooke finally texted, and she wrote that I had humiliated her. She said I could have handled this privately, like a normal sister. I answered once, and only once, with a plain sentence. Eden was excluded, and no one cared until I stopped hosting. Brooke did not reply, and I did not chase her. Taryn posted vague quotes about betrayal, and tagged family members for sympathy. Susan called twice, and left a voicemail that sounded like prayer. She said she missed the way things used to be, and she blamed me for change. James sent one short message, and it said, "You are overreacting." Eric read it, and he asked if he should respond. I told him no, because my boundary was not a debate. Christmas arrived with less food and more peace. Ian and I made cinnamon rolls, and we played music, and we did not rush. Eric hung lights on the porch, and Eden laughed when he got tangled. We went to a small movie theater, and we shared popcorn, and the cashier wished us a happy holiday. No one asked about blood, and no one treated Eden like a guest. Later that week, a few family members reached out privately. Elise apologized for forwarding the email, and she said she was ashamed. Aunt Marlene admitted she had believed Taryn at first. Then she read my record. She said she had been blind, and she asked how Eden was doing. I thanked her for asking, and I told her Eden was healing. I did not reopen the door for everyone, and I did not offer another chance on demand. I learned that forgiveness without change is only permission. Eden kept her phone off more often, and she started drawing again. One night she showed me a sketch of our living room, warm and bright, with all three of us on the couch. She wrote under it, "Safe place." I put it on the fridge, and I let myself believe her. January came, and the world moved on like it always does. The family did not suddenly transform, and I did not expect it. What changed was my own posture, and the way I protected my home. I kept my blocks in place, and I stopped checking for updates. Eden returned to her routines, but with a new caution in her voice. When she talked about college, she spoke softly, like dreams could be stolen. I told her to speak them out loud anyway. She applied to art programs, and she wrote essays about resilience and chosen family. Eric helped her build a portfolio, and he stayed up late fixing a scanner. I watched my daughter claim her future with both hands. One afternoon, Susan showed up again, not with cookies this time, but with tears. She asked to talk, and she said she was sorry for how things went. I asked her what she was sorry for, and she paused too long. She said she was sorry I felt hurt, and she was sorry the family was divided. She did not say Eden deserved better, and she did not say Brooke was wrong. I told Susan that apologies without truth do not heal anyone. Susan looked offended, and she said I was being difficult. I told her I was being clear. I said, Eden is my daughter, and she is your granddaughter, or you are not welcome here. Susan left with her chin high and her pride intact. Eden watched from the hallway, and she did not flinch this time. Later, she told me she had expected that answer, and she was glad I asked the question. In early spring, Eden received an acceptance email, and she screamed, then laughed, then cried. She got into a school she loved, with a scholarship for her art. We celebrated with takeout and sparkling cider and a messy kitchen. I realized then that my family of origin had been shrinking, while my real family was growing stronger. The story they told about us could not touch what we built. By the end of that summer, Eden packed for college, and the house filled with boxes. She labeled everything carefully, because she likes control when life changes. The night before we drove her to campus, she asked me a question in the dark. She asked if I ever regretted choosing her, because it cost me my family. I sat up, and I told her the truth without drama. I did not lose my family. I shed people who refused to love you fully. I told her that love with conditions is not love. It is a contract. Eden reached for my hand, and she held it, like she was anchoring herself. The next morning we drove for hours, and Eric played her favorite playlist. We carried her boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and we made her bed twice, because she wanted it perfect. When we hugged goodbye, she held on longer than usual, and she whispered, "Thank you for picking me." On the drive home, my phone buzzed, and it was Brooke. She wrote that she heard Eden was leaving, and she wished her well. Then she added that I still owed the family an apology. I stared at the screen, and I felt nothing but distance. I did not answer, and I did not explain, and I did not negotiate. I blocked her, and I put my phone away. A few weeks later, Eden sent a picture of her first gallery wall, with her sketches taped up neatly. She wrote, "I feel like I belong here." I saved the picture, and I cried, because belonging is the whole point. People will tell you that blood is everything, but they say that when blood has always protected them. I learned something different. Family is the place where a child feels safe, even when the world is cruel. That is the only definition I need, and it is the one I will live by.